A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
But first, we're going to check in with Greg Bondar from Christian Voice Australia. He's the national spokesperson for this organisation. It's a national think tank and advocacy group for families, liberty and faith. And Greg Bondar, I want to welcome you to 2020 today.
Oh, good morning, Andrew. Thank you very much for having me on, and good to be with you again.
It's always good to see you, Greg, and always good to hear your thoughts. There is a lot going on right now in the political space in Australia.
Yeah, absolutely, Andrew. And I think one of the issues we've got is really we've just had the UK elections, we've got the federal elections coming up, and I'd say probably this year, if not early next year, and then we've got the United States presidential elections in November. So there's a lot happening, Andrew.
There is, and just coming back closer to home, the Senator Fatima Payman resignation from the Australian Labor Party. This is big news, Greg, and share your thoughts with me about that.
Yeah, look, it's interesting that you raise it, Andrew. One of the problems we've got here is that she has failed to follow party process. So internally, the Labor Party have their own procedures, their own policies, and she's failed to follow the caucus vote. The situation being that that's untenable as far as a political candidate for a party is. The issue I have is that she's now encouraging people to form a Muslim party as distinct from a party that has a biblical worldview, which is what I'm advocating for, Andrew. And you see, one of the problems we've got is that as Christians, we need to care about how law and policy shape society. We need to know which issues should matter to us as Christians and how might a political party affect our freedom to share the good news of the gospel. So really in this pre-election phase, Andrew, we need to be informed about how to vote, campaign, pray, and have a conversation about the election through a biblical lens, but not what the senator is suggesting, is that you have a Muslim party, irrespective of policy, you just have it because you're a Muslim. Well, that's untenable, I think, in the public arena.
Yeah, it's a very interesting one. What I found interesting is that she said the reason she left the Australian Labor Party was her conscience leaves her with no choice. And she also offered stinging criticism of the Labor Party, saying that she'd experienced intimidation on many fronts. And this is the same Australian Labor Party. Prime Minister Albanese just recently announced a $1 billion package to fight, violence against women. And she claimed that some of her Labor Senate colleagues made it very clear they didn't want to sit next to her in the chamber. They invaded the space that she had, as well as controlling and constantly pushing her for an answer on the day she was to cross the floor. So not a good look for the Australian Labor Party, Greg.
No, it's not, Andrew. And you see, if you just go back a step or two, don't forget she resigned because she was supporting the Palestinians. Now, the problem we've got here is that the Palestinian, of course, was motivated by Hamas, which is a terrorist group, and she has failed to denounce or renounce, rather, the fact that they are a terrorist group. Now, if that's who she supports, then maybe she should step down and get out of politics altogether, because, quite frankly, there's no room for having 1,200 Jews, Israelis, killed by a terrorist group and then supporting that group that did the killing. It's just not on, Andrew.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm not saying that we all agree with her beliefs or her values, but I think the process that whole little journey went through is not a good look for Labor or for Albanese, because she also accused Prime Minister Albanese of bullying her as he summoned her to a Sunday evening meeting and demanded that she either toe the line or resign.
Yeah. Andrew, the politicians and people that don't know what to say or have an answer for a question always pull out either the racism card, the bullying card, or whatever it else might be to help your defence. But unfortunately, she has nothing to stand on. She's not supporting the actual fact that the Labor Party is not supporting the Palestinians, although there's some question about that. Quite frankly, she's better off out of Parliament altogether and go back to whatever she was doing, because there's no room for having somebody support the Palestinians who have killed 1,200 Israelis for no reason at all, Andrew. And, that is the issue at hand.
Yeah, absolutely. But it also raises a bigger question, Greg, because Prime Minister Albanese also recently expressed his concern about faith-based political parties, stating that they would undermine social cohesion in the country. Now, this has an impact on Christian-based parties too, doesn't it?
Yep, absolutely, Andrew. Now, this is the two-edged sword. You see, quite frankly, there has not been a Christian political party federally since the Christian Democratic Party. And as you know, I was the federal director of the Christian Democratic Party. I've also worked for the Liberal Party, and I advised the Prime Minister, John Howard, on many issues. The point we've got here, Andrew, is that there's a difference between having a faith party and having a political faith party. In other words, what we say as Christians is vote for the party that best reflects a biblical worldview. What the senator is suggesting with her new Muslim party is vote for the Muslims, irrespective of policy. Well, that is not going to work with the general mums and dads in the electorate, Andrew.
Yeah, absolutely. But do you think there's room in Australia, Greg, for more Christian political parties or Christian-based political parties? That should more Christians step up into this space? Or do you believe that Christians should just join the mainstream parties and bring reform from within?
No, I actually think, Andrew, that we need to have a Christian political party or a party with Christians. Because, see, one of the problems is that we've got a lot of Christians in Parliament at the moment, but they're not speaking up. They're not reflecting their faith. They're not demonstrating that they have a Christian or biblical worldview. You see, one of the reasons, if we're going to want to make sure that the human society flourishes, then we're going to have more people in politics. And quite frankly, there's a call, and I have to tell you, I had a phone call just the other day asking me would I be interested in looking at starting up another Christian Democratic Party, and in response to the Muslim Party, because quite frankly, Andrew, if we're going to have a Muslim party, then there's absolutely every reason why we need a Christian Democratic Party to counter what they're going to be doing, because they're now suggesting 2 seats in Sydney, which is the highest number of Muslims in the country, and no doubt they will win 2 seats if it all goes to plan.
So that's Blaxland and Watson, isn't it? Those 2 seats.
Correct. Yeah, correct. And the reason I'm opposed to that is because they're saying to their candidates, vote for Muslims irrespective of policy, where we're saying as Christians, vote for the policy that best reflects the Christian worldview, Andrew. So it's a big difference.
Absolutely. So what is the word on the street then? Is this Christian Democrat Party going to see a resurgence and a revival in Australia?
Well, Andrew, I'll tell you what, I'm very tempted, Andrew. I'm looking for candidates, Andrew, if you're free, but, there is every possibility that we need a Christian Democratic Party, because at the moment there's not one party. There's a lot of parties at the moment that claim to be Christian, but I think that they have a conservative worldview rather than a Christian worldview, and there's a big difference between the two, Andrew. Look, don't be surprised if there is. If I go to the US, 87% of Americans still believe in God, and as they go to the presidential elections in November, so there's a lot of grounds for having a new party, Andrew.
Yeah, well, I think if I'm going to get involved in politics, I need some Botox and a new hairstylist, Greg. So give me a bit of time and space to get back to you about that. But let's talk about the US, because if we have a federal election later this year or even early next year, our federal election will be overshadowed by the US election without a doubt. It's amazing how many Australian journalists, and I would call them lazy journalists, they sort of refer to America all the time as if somehow Australia and America are the same place, same culture, same politics, but we're not, but we will be overshadowed. What are your thoughts on the US presidential race that's going on right now?
Look, Andrew, let's be quite frank. The Biden administration has been the epitome of left-wing wokeness since day one. It has been totally against the, abortion. All for abortion, and totally against freedom of faith. It has been against life. quite frankly, it's been a very much a woke party. Now, whether you love Donald Trump or hate him, the fact is he's a conservative. He's done a lot for America in terms of the economy, in terms of immigration, in terms of border control, in terms of getting the economy back on track. I can't say the same for Biden. Now, the only thing that I do say, though, Andrew, is with a population the size of America, the best two candidates we can come up with is Biden and Trump. There's a lot to be said for American politics, but quite frankly, I'd have to declare my hand, and I think probably Trump will win, and rightly so, given the circumstances of the Biden administration's past history, Andrew.
Yeah, well, it's looking like the Democrats in America are getting very nervous, and I think a number of Democrat Senate governors have recently told Biden privately to step down. They're getting very worried about the election, and it's looking like they're favouring that Kamala Harris to take over as the front runner. What are your thoughts on her as a potential president of the United States?
Andrew, I've got to think of some nice words to say, but unfortunately, Kamala Harris would be even a greater disaster than Biden. I think she's out of her depth. She's really there as window dressing, and unfortunately, she doesn't have the political astuteness as somebody like perhaps even Biden or Obama had. And knowing that I've got friends over there that are telling me Kamala Harris would be a disaster as well, Andrew.
Do you think the American population are too smart, though, to vote her in? Do you think that she wouldn't stand a chance against Trump?
I don't think she would, Andrew. I think Trump would make mincemeat out of her. I think Trump's far too politically astute. I think Trump has a record. I can't put my finger on one thing that Kamala Harris has done to enable her to say, hey, vote for me. And I'm trying to be objective here, but unfortunately, she's not the candidate.
Yeah, well, she's very hard left, and as you said, I think like a lot of people who are hard left in the modern world, they're very naive because you've only got to read a history book about the last 100 years about what extreme socialism and communism does to economies and societies, and there's not a single good story in there, is there, in the last 100 years?
No, there's not, Andrew. Look, you and I, we're Christians. We've got a biblical worldview. Unfortunately, the Biden administration has been about promoting abortion, not considering the life that there is of a beating heart. They've been about LGBTIQA ideology. They've been all about, wokeness at its height. I mean, Andrew, quite frankly, it's time that we Christians were recognised for what we believe in, and that's basically to have a country, an economy, a society that flourishes under a biblical worldview. And I make no apology. And I think more of us should step up and let Albanese and Peter Dutton know, hey, we're Christians and we're voting, and so you better listen to what we've got to say.
Well said, Greg. Maybe you should run for the Christian Democrat Party of Australia. I think that's a message that would resonate with a lot of Christians. And, ironically, I think even a lot of non-Christians who have a faith would resonate with your message, because we occasionally see even Muslim and Hindu leaders in Australia standing up and saying, you know what, we don't mind when Christians stand up for what they believe in, and we don't mind their message, because our message is about compassion. It's about building society. It's about businesses flourishing. It's not like we preach a message that's actually going to destroy our society, is it?
No, and that's the point you make, Andrew, that a Christian party advocates for people to vote for policies that reflect the biblical worldview. The proposed Muslim party says, vote for us, irrespective of policy, because we're Muslims. Well, where's that going to get you? What's that going to help the mum and dads in the street or in the electorate? Nowhere. So, they are very politically charged, where we're saying, vote for policies that reflect a biblical worldview. And we're not saying which party, we're just saying vote for the policies that reflect that, Andrew.
Yeah, and as voters, that's what we should be looking for, shouldn't we? When we go to our state elections later this year, if our particular states are having an election, and when this federal election springs up, whenever that is, end of this year or early next year, as Christians, we should really check out the policies, shouldn't we? The stated policies of the respective candidates or the parties, and if they align with our Christian worldview, that's really where our vote should be, shouldn't it?
Absolutely. Look, I was looking at some political parties. I'm doing actually a research paper on politics and Christianity because of the elections coming up. But I looked at some political parties, Andrew, that claimed to be Christian, but when I looked at their candidates, none of them were Christian. and they claim to be a Christian party. So you've got to be very careful that you are, you're not voting for a wolf in sheep's clothing, Andrew.
Absolutely. And just quickly, the Conservatives in the UK have been trounced in their recent election, absolutely smashed by the Labor Party. What are your reflections on that?
Now, interesting you mentioned that. Now, one of the reasons I've got to tell you there is that the Conservatives were beat because, again, Conservative parties, the right wing, if you want to put it that way, have been forced to go left, and unfortunately they've not looked after the majority of the people in terms of being a conservative, Judeo-Christian background. And what's happened, Andrew, is that, I think they lost a lot of the people that supported that particular Conservative party. The other thing is too that I think, once you get into a situation, and unfortunately this is a game of politics, is that once you've had a run for 14 years, you tend to give the other party a go, And Andrew, I'm going to put my hand up. When I was at uni, the first time I voted Labor was for Whitlam because I wanted to see a change, but I haven't voted since for a Labor Party, but that's because of my biblical worldview. But the point is that it's always time for a change. I don't particularly think that the UK Labor Party is going to last long, just because they're inexperienced, their policies are not grounded on foundational values. So I don't think they're going to last, and I think they'll be struggling, but I do wish them well because, there's always time for a change.
Yeah, well, I guess Whitlam didn't really bring the change that you were looking for, Greg. And again, an idealistic, fairly young guy who had all these socialist ideas and thought he could change the world and make Australia a better place. But so far, no one that has adopted that hardline left socialist approach to a politics in the modern Western democracy has been able to pull it off and actually make positive change, from my observation anyway.
Yeah, I totally agree. And our current Prime Minister, unfortunately, if you listen to the commentators, would have to be one of the most inept Prime Ministers that we've got. And I'm sorry to say that. He's driven by the backroom boys. He doesn't really have a thought about where the country should be headed. And unfortunately, we're stuck with him till the next election. But I had a webinar last week, Andrew, very quickly with Senator Cash, and she was wonderful talking about the proposed anti-discrimination bill that was reviewed by the Australian Law Reform Commission. And quite frankly, it's a real dangerous minefield that they're proposing, they being the Labor Party. So, Andrew, I urge everybody, think before you vote in the upcoming elections.
Absolutely. And pray for Australia, pray for our leaders, and pray for God's will to be done. Greg Bondar, the national spokesman for the Christian Voice Australia. It's always good hearing your thoughts with such a wealth of experience in politics. As you said, you were an advisor to the John Howard government. You've been involved in the Christian Democrat Party. And Greg, we really value your time and thank you for joining us on 2020 today.
God bless you, Andrew, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.